Welcome to Stardust Stereo. I'm Parker McVinney. I'm your host. Today is the 9th of May, year 2024. Today I'm going to speak about many things, not just one. I've been tackling the very delicate and difficult issue of the war going on in Gaza. And I've been contemplating astrologically what the indicators could be to indicate a ceasefire. I also have been thinking about the Jupiter-Uranus conjunction that happened on April 20th, and the fact that in 2 days, on the 11th of May, the Sun will co-join that Jupiter-Uranus conjunction that happened. So in essence, it puts a fire under it or sparks it up. Maybe we'll start with that because that's a little bit more optimistic, except for the possibility of a massive earthquake, which is a very real thing. Whenever the outers commingle in a conjunction, intertwined, they are triggered at various points, just like eclipses are. So wherever that Jupiter-Uranus 22 degrees Taurus point fell in your chart, the Sun is now moving to that degree. And on the 11th of this month, May, it will put a little fire underneath the ideas, the opportunities, the changes, the openings that you might have manifested. I did a whole podcast on the Jupiter conjunct Uranus. You can look it up, maybe re-listen to it, and pay attention around the 11th, not just on the 11th, but like all this week, and see what ideas you had at that point have germinated. Did you plant those seeds? Now, Jupiter deals with other cultures, and Uranus can bring a sudden awareness to other cultures or to other cultural understanding that we may arrive at, some breakthrough in our own brain of a higher knowledge. Jupiter always deals with knowledge, but it also deals with how we relate, how we transport that knowledge into action. So that's the good news. The also maybe good news is that with very serious work, maybe a ceasefire could come about this week, but I just don't feel it. Because as much as I want that for everybody involved, I have had podcast block, meaning as I wrote down my notes and tried to prepare for this podcast, I didn't like anything that was coming up. I like to inspire people to be their highest. And the reason that I didn't like what was coming up was I looked at Israel's birth chart. I looked at America's birth chart because, of course, our relationship with our ally is a little tense right now, probably having a little bit to do with the 35,000 people that have been killed. And, maybe the inability to show a restraint from Israel's government and the civilians and the children. Basically, that's what bums me out more than anything, is the 14,000 children that have been burnt and buried and starved to death. I just can't not think about it. And I think that it's my duty as a person that has always been active against all wars and a long-time astrologer looking at charts, trying to figure out when the possible peace may come. Now, of course, we know one war ends, another begins. This just seems to be the vampire of humanity. That's actually what came to me as I was walking, trying to break through my podcast block. The vampires of war never get enough blood. It's just, there's no end to the blood that they crave. And then I thought, well, what if they had to drink all that blood of everybody that died? Would they then get sick of war and stop it? I don't know. I'm deeply for everybody getting along. And when you have neighbors that cannot get along and are bent on destroying each other, where do you find the answer? We can look at the new moons, the quarter moons, and the full moons to see when a breakthrough may happen. Now, there is a quarter moon happening on the 15th, right after Israel has its annual solar return. I can see very clearly the overaction of protection in Israel's chart. Israel was born with Mars in Leo, and it's in an exact trine to Jupiter in Sagittarius. And so there is an extreme, strong righteousness that is there to protect oneself at all cost. And that is playing out very clearly right now. In the sky, Neptune is in Pisces, and it creates a square to that Jupiter, which says, maybe you might consider that you've gone a little too far. And that gone a little too far question is going to become prevalent on May 15th when the quarter moon creates a very interesting dynamic in Israel's chart. The moon will be at 25 degrees Leo, just short of conjunction to Israel's Mars, and just short of a trine to its Jupiter. The sun is at 25 degrees Taurus. So obviously the sun and the moon in the sky are in a square, hence quarter moon. It's the first quarter moon. So this energy of leadership, sun always represents leadership, square to the moon, which is public. So within Israel, within itself, in its own country, there's going to be conflict, and we know that this is true. There have been very vocal protests within the country against this war. But the key element that I'm looking at is that Uranus in the sky will be exactly, well, not exactly, just short of exact, conjunct to Israel's sun. That means a leadership change, a sudden leadership change. I'll leave it at that. I want to take you forward to the full moon of May 23rd. That full moon at 2 degrees Sagittarius, opposite the sun at 2 degrees Gemini, will fall in BB's 12th house, BB being the leader of Israel. That indicates that some behind-the-scenes action will be going on. But what truly caught my eye was that just a few days before that full moon, Mars in the sky will be exactly conjunct BB's, that's what I call him because I have difficulty pronouncing his last name. So Mars in the sky will be conjunct Phoebe's North Node cycle of becoming. When Mars conjuncts the North Node, you either are filled with anger or anger is aimed at you. We don't know which way it will go, but he is also having, or just had, a nodal return. So that this indicates he's actually in a cycle to trying something new. That nodal return was on February 20th of this year. And the chart for his nodal return is quite fascinating because the moon is in the 12th house. 12th house is the hidden house. 12th house is also hidden enemies. And that moon is square his North Node return, which is in the 10th house, and it's exactly conjunct Chiron. So that 16 degrees of cardinal energy is quite sensitive, and when Mars hits it, we could see some interesting shifts happening with his longevity of the career, as it just might be curtailed. That will be taking place on the 22nd of May, a day before the full moon that so impacts his chart. Well, I think that it's just fair to say that the next quarter moon, full moon, and the following quarter moon are going to be a little bit rough for Israel and Palestine. But I'm not giving up hope, because by the new moon of June 6th, I see very strong possibility of a ceasefire. Very, very strong. Because in that chart, there's the sun, the moon, and Venus all conjunct. So I believe that it's a possibility for a peace treaty, or at least closer than we've gotten so far. That new moon will make a lovely trine to Palestine's first house Venus, which is at 19 degrees Libra. And all of the Gemini in that chart that will be happening on that new moon, June 6th, there will be Sun, Moon, Venus, Vertex, Mercury, Jupiter will all be in Gemini. Sun, Moon, Venus, and Vertex will fall in the 9th house of Palestine. And this could facilitate, since it's trining their birth Venus, it could facilitate a treaty. So let's just hope for that. You know, at one point this war is going to end. And the sooner it ends, the better. I'm going to briefly look at America's chart and what's going on with us. I use a 12:15 p.m. time chart for America, July 4th, 1776, LMT time. So that gives us a 13 degrees Libra rising. The South Node is in our first house, and it's conjunct, just about to be exact conjunct to our birth Saturn, also in the first house. So America right now is learning about how lessons of our past have not been learned. We're in a period right now to reflect in the past and the mistakes we made and how we could maybe not repeat those mistakes. I think it's just obvious. Getting involved in wars that never end, that bankrupt us. Other than that, we are also dealing with the Jupiter conjunct Uranus that fell in our 8th house. So the stock market is going to continue to kind of be woo, up and down. People aren't confident right now. The inflation, high rents. I wish I could be more optimistic, but this is the reality we're facing with right now. So we've got to get a grip on where our money's going. On the 17th, Mars will enter our 7th house. That's the house of open enemies, the people that we know don't like us. So there's always people that don't like you, be it a country, a person, a business. This is just the nature of the world. So as Mars enters into our 7th house, we need to reassess how we defend ourselves against our enemies, which have just increased because of our undivided support of our ally Israel, which really needs to be curbed, in my opinion. Boundaries are not a bad thing. Also, we will continue to see the protests going on because Mars will be squaring our sun, and that just is a frustrating aspect. It's also an aspect where you can get a lot accomplished if you have the correct way to utilize the energy. Our president is going to continue to be the recipient of not so pleasant words. I'll end with the good note that after the 15th, Mercury will be out of the shadow. It's retrograde shadow. If you don't know what that means, it is the time frame of when Mercury first went retrograde, way back at the beginning of April, which seems like another lifetime ago. Until Mercury moves past that degree that it was at when it turned retrograde, it is not considered completely out of the shadow, even though it is going direct in motion. So on the 15th, it will be past that degree and all systems go. And let's just pray that those systems go toward peace. I'm Parker McPhinney. This is Stardust Stereo. Thank you for listening. I'd like to thank my patrons. You know who you are. If you'd like to become a patron, you can do so at patreon.com/ParkerMcP. Then you will get these podcasts when they are first produced and not days later, since it's time-sensitive material. I'd also like to let you know that I have my own Stardust Stereo Astrology YouTube channel now. So now I'm on 14 different channels, and you can tune in on YouTube if that's easier for you to listen to me. And I want to remind you, you are made of stardust, so go shine.